In this video, we're going to be talking about advanced parameters in Python, specifically how to create parameters and add them to nodes. So before we were creating this noise point tool, which would just add noise expressions to a point SOP. What we're going to do today, if we just put down a geometry node, delete the file, and create a point SOP, and maybe a sphere to plug into it, and then maybe change it to polygon, give it a little bit of frequency, and turn off the ground plane. Okay, so what we're going to do today is add frequency controls and amplitude controls to the top of this node as spare parameters. Okay, so how do we create a new parameter in Python? Well, if we just go to our experiment tool here, and I'm just going to comment out these. Okay, so the way that this works is you create what's called a parm template. So we could say template equals who dot. And then unfortunately, even though there is a parm template class in the who module, you can't just create a parm template straight up, because this is actually a base class. So what we want to actually do, say we want to make a string parm, we do who dot string parm template. And then we just give it a name, say blurg, and a label, say label blurg. And the number of components is how many fields the string parm will have. So if we want to say like 2 fields, it should give us 2 fields. And then we can give it a default value. And you'll notice that it's expecting a tuple there. That's the reason why there's 2 parentheses there. So what we can do for default value is just say something like Zorg fun. And then those are probably the most common parameters. Yeah, you guys can figure out what the other ones do. So if we close parenthesis and then just say print template and hit apply, and click on experiment, you can see that we have our string parm template. Okay, so the simplest way to add this to our node is by first getting an instance of our node. So we can say node equals, and then drag the point SOP in there. And then we can just say node dot add spare parm tuple template and hit apply. So now if we just hit experiment, it seems like nothing happened, but actually it just stuck it down here at the bottom. And you can see there's our defaults. And if we change it and then say revert to defaults, it changes it back to that. So that's the basic way to add a parameter to a node in Python. Okay, so how can we find all the different types of string parm or parm templates? Well, the simplest way is probably just to go to the Houdini help. So if we do help, Houdini help, and then we can just search for who.parm template, which gives us this one. Now if we just hit find, we'll probably find most of them here. But if we want to get a really accurate list, which this probably is an accurate list, but if we want to see them all together, we can just click on who.parm template, and this subclasses section here shows all the different types. Okay, so let's just go ahead and get rid of this. Now there is something kind of annoying about this, and that's that when we created this parm, it stuck it all the way down here at the bottom, and that's almost never what we're going to want. So let's just go ahead and remove it by going to Edit Parameter Interface here, and then going down to the bottom and just deleting this, hitting accept. So now it's gone. So the way that we can tell it where to add parameters is if instead of using the spare parm tuple function, we instead get a node group, or a parm group. So to do that, you can say something like group equals node.parmTemplate group. And you can think of this group as basically all the parameters on the interface of your node. So you can use it to add or remove parameters or rearrange the interface. So basically it's a way of managing the interface for your node. So the way that we add a template to this group is we can say something like group.insertBefore. And then what it's expecting here is either the name of a parameter or an index in the parm template group, which we'll be just be using parameter names. So if we look at the name of the group parameter, it's actually just group. So we can give it a string group as the first argument. And the second argument is just a parm template to stick in there. So if we say template. Now notice if we hit apply now and click on experiment, nothing happens. And that's because this parm template group does not automatically update back to the node. So essentially we're just getting a value that represents the interface of the node, and then we've made modifications to that value, but we haven't actually told it to put it back on the node yet. So the way that we do that is to go down here and say node.setParmTemplate group. So basically we get an object that points to the parm template group for this node, and then we insert our parm template, and then we set the parm template group back onto the node. So now if we hit apply and we click on experiment, there's our parameter up here. So we can use functions on our group parm template to do all kinds of crazy things to our interface, which we'll not be going into now. Instead, let's just go ahead and go to Edit Parameter Interface and delete this guy. Hit accept. We're going to go ahead and make our noise point tool a little bit more robust. So let's hit accept on experiment, and then just go to noise point and hit edit tool. So let's go ahead and add some parameters to our node. So let's just put them, if we make ourselves a few new lines here, let's put that code here. So I'm just going to put in a comment that says add parm templates to node. Okay, so the first things that we're going to need are the parm templates for frequency and amplitude. So if we say frequency template equals who dot, and what we want here is a float parm template. And then the name can be freak. And then we can just give it frequency as the label. Num components needs to be 3 because it's going to be XYZ. And then default value, we can just make 1, 1, 1. And then another close parenthesis to catch that one. Why 1, 1, 1? Because it's frequency, and 0, 0, 0 frequency doesn't really mean anything, because it's just going to be multiplying by 0 into these positions. So the second thing we need is our amplitude template. So if we do amplitude template equals, and then we can just copy and paste this code because we want it to be the same. The only thing that we want to change is the name, so we can just change this to amp and change this to amplitude. And that should be good to go. So the next thing we need to do is get our node, our parm template group from our node. So we can do, if you remember, the current node that we're modifying is who node here. So what we can do is we can just say parm group equals who node dot parm template group. And then we can just do parm group dot insert before. And then we want to say group frequency, or actually let's do amplitude template first. Amplitude template. So it's the exact same thing we were doing before. We're just inserting before this parameter. And now we want to insert the frequency template. So now what we want to do is we want to insert frequency before amplitude. So essentially you want frequency to end up above amplitude. So the way that we can do that is parm group.insert before. But this time we can just give it amplitude template, because amplitude template contains all of the information that we need to get to that parameter in the parm group. And then we just give it frequency template. And the last thing that we need to do is set this parm group back onto our node. So we can do who node dot set parm template group parm group. Alright, let's see if that worked. So if we select our point here and we hit noise point, there we go, frequency and amplitude. Now you'll notice that if we change these parameters, it doesn't actually really affect our noise pattern, and that's because we didn't update the expressions that we put into this position field. So these expressions are still just using noise $tx, $ty, $tz. What they really need to do is update to use channel references so that it uses these parameters. So let's make it do that. So the easiest way to do that is just to change this expression here. So if we say $tx times, we can say ch freak x. So we just want to add this here next to $tx. $ty times ch freak y. Then over here at the end, just $tz times ch freak z. Now if we hit apply, and let's just go ahead and create a new point SOP, so just move this one over here, and put down a new point SOP, wire it in, and display it. Let's see what it does. Okay, so that's almost right. We can just change the frequency now. So how do we implement amplitude? Well, the thing about the amplitude is that we just want to make times ch amp at the end here. But the trouble is we need x, y, or z, depending on which one we want to actually have in here. So again, there are a couple of different ways that we could approach this, but I think the simplest way is just to define another list here. So we can say amp tuple, or amp list maybe, equals amp x, amp y, amp z. And then down here we can just say, instead of amp here, we can leave the quote here, and then close single quotes, and that's going to close off this one here. And say plus single quote, or plus amp list index, plus, and then what you'll want to do is just put another single quote here. And then make sure that there's a double quote here as well, because we need to close off this quote here. Sorry. This quote. So now if we hit apply, bring this back a bit, and let's just make another point swap. Let's see if that works. So we select this one and hit noise point. There we go, amp x, amp y, and amp z. Okay, so now if we change the amplitude, it does bring it in. And if we change it on a single axis, it works. And then we can also change the frequency. Okay, so that's pretty cool, but what if we want to add parameters into a folder up here? So let's take a look at how to do that. And then what if we want to add them to a folder that already exists? And we'll look at how to do that. So first of all, if we want to create a new folder and then add these two parameters to it, what we would do is first create a folder parm template. So if we go down here, we can say folder template equals who.folder parm template. And then we just need to give it a name and a label again. So we can say noise settings for the name, noise settings for the label. And then we can either just give it a list of parm templates right now, or we can use the add parm template function on the folder template object to add them later. So let's just add them now for the purposes of this demonstration. So first we'll add frequency template, and then we'll add amplitude template. Close parenthesis. So now this folder already contains these parm templates, so we're not going to need to manually add them to the parm group. Instead, what we can do is just comment out this line where we're adding the amplitude template, or sorry, where we're adding the frequency template before the amplitude template. And instead of adding amplitude template, we just add folder template. So let's actually even just comment out this line and say instead parm group dot insert before group folder template, and hit apply. So now if we create a new point swap and wire it in and display it, let's see what happens when we hit our noise point. There we go. Okay, so what if we want to add these parameters to a folder that already exists, say to the standard folder? Well, I'd like you guys to notice something about the workflow that we're using to add parameters in Python. If we hit the gear here and go to Edit Parameter Interface, You'll notice that this workflow is exactly the same as the workflow that we use to add parameters here. So if I were to add a folder, I would just add it there and then add parameters to it. If I wanted to add a parameter before this one, I drag it in and I put it before that one. So we're going to be doing something similar with adding to a folder that already exists. So notice that I don't have to create a new folder and then add parameters to it if I want to add parameters here. Here, if I want to add a parameter, I just stick it in there, and that's before this position parameter. So what we should be able to do if we hit cancel here is if we put down a new point, we should be able to just add our parameters before the t parameter. So let's see if that works. So I'm just going to comment out this line and the folder template line. And then let's just add some new lines here. So parm group dot insert before. Our parm name is t. And then our template is amplitude template. And then we'll want to do parm group dot insert before amplitude template. Oops, that is not a string because that is not what we want. Frequency template, which is the same line as this one. So if we hit apply now, and we just go over to our 0.5 node, make sure it's selected and hit noise point, there we go.